to welcome you all along to the Parenting a Sport Champion seminar, and thank you all very much for coming. Just before I get started, the toilets are just outside the door as you came, the way that you came in, and if there is a fire, our meeting point are out these doors here and out on the grass. So hopefully not, but you all know if there is. So we've had great interest in this topic, and I suppose unfortunately when you do have children there's not a manual to tell you how to be the best parent, or especially if you've got a sporty kid, how to bring them up and encourage that passion of sport. So it's always a good topic to have a chat and share some ideas, and we've got some experts along here to hopefully share their stories. So how it's going to work is shortly I'll introduce our guests to you, and then we'll have a bit of a question and answer session up here. At the end it will be opened up to you guys as the audience to ask your questions, so have a wee think about questions you'd like answered, and you'll get that opportunity later on. So before we do that, I'd just like to introduce Scarlett Hagan from Sport Otago, and she is going to tell you a little bit about the sideline behaviour campaign that she has recently launched. Now we know you all here are fantastic parents and would behave brilliantly on the sideline. So what we need is some help from you to get the message across to all the other parents and everyone involved in sport really about what is appropriate behaviour on the sideline, what is okay and what's not so okay. So yeah, help us to get that message out there, and I'll let Scarlett tell you more.
Cool. Hi folks, thanks for coming along. Lots of familiar faces, and I've emailed with most of you, so thanks for coming along. So yeah, I've been working on the sideline behaviour campaign with Sport Otago. We've had the support of the Bendigo Valley charity alongside the Otago Community Trust, who are really big supporters of the work that we do at Sport Otago. So we're working on sort of cracking down on bad sideline behaviour. I'm sure you've all seen it. Often it's coaches, umpires, refs, sometimes the players themselves, and often the parents on the sidelines that are, you know, a bit tough on the officials, or also sometimes tough on their kids. So yeah, it's a hot topic in New Zealand at the moment, and we're really cracking down on it. We've got some resources that are available on the Sport Otago website. So we'll just quickly whiz through these. So this is the brochure that we've got, and to get sort of the information for the sideline behaviour project, I looked at information from all around the world about sort of key tips for cracking down on it. So these are them, and you feel free to grab a brochure on your way out today. There's posters at the door and also A4 flyers. So here's the A4 flyers, just with nice messages on the bottom that perhaps might hit home, you know, for some people. So these are the A3 posters. We've got these available, as I said, on our website, but we've also got packs that have been sent out to all RSOs, so that's regional sporting organisations in Otago. So perhaps if your child is involved with the sport, then it would be really great if you sort of encourage them to get that information out there. So the packs have been sent out to 67 RSOs and all schools in Otago, so 148 schools, and there's been 12,000 individual bits of paper printed, put into these packs and sent out. So it is quite a big campaign, hopefully quite a big impact, but it's certainly just a start in cracking down on sideline behaviour in Otago. So this is the A3 poster. Okay, so the resources that you guys can get online, there's quite a few of them, all in PDF form, so feel free to print them out. Spectators Code of Conduct, Players Code of Conduct, Players Agreement, so something that the kids sign at the start of the season to say that they're going to abide by sort of these regulations. Code of Conduct Agreement forms, Coaches Code of Conduct, so how they're going to act, coach philosophy, sort of figuring out what type of coach they're going to be for the season, and the officials' code of conduct. So yeah, that's the information that we've got. Feel free to have a look at our website or contact me at Sport Otago for more information on it. Right, over to the Parents.
Okay, so I'm just going to introduce them. So first up is Stu and Karen Smith. So if you can stand, thank you, and just come up on our stage here. So they are parents of All Black Ben Smith. So Ben plays for the Highlanders and also for Otago for the ITM Cup. He used to play for the Green Island Rugby Club, and he is a local boy and attended King's High School. So thank you for coming along. Right, next up we have Roy and Kay Shanks. So they are parents of two-time world champion cyclist Alison Shanks. So Alison played for the Rebels netball team before changing to cycling in 2005. She's also a local Dunedin girl and attended Queen's High School. And last but not least is Robin and Joe Bates, and they're parents of Whiteburn captain Suzie Bates. So not only has Suzie been very successful in cricket, but she's also a member of the basketball team, the Tall Ferns, who went to the Olympics, Beijing Olympics. So once again, she is a Dunedin girl and she went to Otago Girls High School. So thank you very much for coming along. You're cosy in there. There's not much wriggle room, is it? I'll come this way. Perfect. So yeah, I believe parents have a great position to play in setting the foundations of successful sports people. So you should all be very proud of your successful athletes and your children. So thank you very much for coming along and sharing, and hopefully it's not too daunting for you, because often the athletes are in the limelight, not so much the parents, but they have done just as much hard work as well behind the scenes. So we'll just crack into it. So we often get asked, should children specialise early? And I might stand up. Actually, can everyone hear? Can everyone hear in the back? You don't need mics. So if you can't hear, just raise your hand and we can put a mic on. So yeah, we often get asked, should children specialise early in sports? And yeah, if so, when? So I want to ask you, Robin and Joe, how many sports did Suzie play growing up, and do you think this helped or hindered her success?
Susanna played anything that she could, from as little as she could or as big as she could. And I think that started with soccer, so quite a while now. Soccer, she then played rugby, she played tennis when she was younger, she played cricket, volleyball, probably a few other things that I'm looking for teachers at Girls High, anything that was going. I think that it helped. Any coordination, anything that's fun, enjoyment of being with other people, getting used to being in a team, all those things are important. So when they're little, and they can, and even if as they get a little older, I think Susanna would say play as much as you can, and as many different sports as you can. There comes a time when there's not enough time to go around, and you have to cut down and focus on whatever you like the best, or whatever you think you will succeed at, I guess, or whatever you enjoy the most.
Yeah.
So in short, we would encourage, from our experience, children to play anything they enjoy.
Yeah, great. And she's been very successful, obviously, in juggling both basketball and cricket. So, yeah.
The only thing I would add to that is that I think what you get from some disciplines is an advantage to, there's different things you get from each discipline, and it's really helpful to cross over some of those disciplines and you gain quite a bit from each one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So what sort of age was it that she did specialise in the basketball and cricket? When she went from numerous sports to two?
Well, she ended up playing basketball and cricket seriously up until about 2006, when just after the Beijing Olympics, and then she was having trouble juggling the two. There were a few issues from time to time, and not being available for one or the other caused some issues. Eventually it was cricket that took over, mainly because the structure around cricket and what was available in terms of internationals and the support was better, I guess, but she has always loved cricket, but she'll tell you she loves basketball just so much. So that's, at that point it became an issue.
Thank you. And so you guys have 4 children, so Tom, Henry, Susanna and Olivia. So she's in the middle there, and the oldest of the 2 girls. Would your children ever compete against each other growing up? And what effect did Susie's success have on the other children in your family, if any?
Well, she was always really competitive, so she had to be better than anybody, even her brothers and sisters. I still remember, and Tom just said the other day, we let her play, and as soon as she was losing interest, we let her have a bat. She had to bowl forever until she was looking like she wasn't going to play anymore, so then they let her have 2 minutes batting. So you had to be, pretty competitive against them to get her place on their team.
Yeah. And so her success in sport do you think that's affected any of the other 3 children? Or good way, bad way?
I don't think it has. I don't they're all proud of her. And,
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the boys were good at what they played, but didn't get to the level that she's at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they would say it's because she's a girl and they were boys.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. And what about Kay and Roy? Is there any answer to that one? What about the success of Ellie? Has that impacted on your other 3 younger children? Might get an answer to this.
Well, I think the positive part is that they're obviously proud of Ellie's achievements, and they feed off that. Probably one slight negative is one of the kids has probably steered away from sport a bit because she was always being expected to do well, so she's put a little bit more energy into other aspects, including her music and her academic side of things, and she's done pretty well. But there was a certain time, especially when she was a younger teenager, very sensitive, and people were saying, "Oh, here comes another Ali Shanks," and that didn't go down too well for her in that respect. But she got over it.
Cool. Thank you. Much should I?
Cool. So, Roy and Kay, have there been tough times in Ellie's sporting career that sort of she's had to overcome, and perhaps how have you helped her overcome those tough times?
Yeah, we've been given these questions beforehand, so I've had a little bit of time to prep. But there's probably 3 major challenges that Ellie had, and the first 2 were involving netball. One was when she was in the under-21, New Zealand under-21 team, and it was the second year, and they were having these trials, and there was a sort of an indication given to her that she was going to be the captain that year. At the end of the trials, they read out the team and her name wasn't there, and she was told to pack her bags and go. We later found out that it was because she was going to be too old to be in the team when they played in the World Champs, which was the following couple of years. And so that was one of the critical hurdles that she had. And the next one was netball again, which was involved with a bit of politics and stuff like that. But the third one, which was really, really challenging for her, was when the UCI, which is the international governing body of cycling, decided to take out individual pursuit out of the Olympics. Now, it's a little bit like taking out the single sculls for the rowing or the 1500 metres in the athletics, because it's such a pure part of cycling. And it was her event, and she was current world champion, and it was very, very difficult. Now, I think the question is, how do we respond to that? Well, the first thing that we did, and this is looking back in hindsight, it wasn't a case of saying, hey, this is what I've got to do, but the first thing was that we were pretty sympathetic, and it was very, very easy to be sympathetic because we were, quite frankly, pissed off. Your daughter's current world champ, and she's been training for this for many, many years, and 60 hours a week out there on the bike, and all of a sudden they take her event away, and it was basically the only hurdle that she hadn't achieved, having had a gold in the Commonwealth Games and also world champ, etc. But so it was easy for us to be sympathetic, and we had a lot of empathy for what Ellie was going through, and we called the UCI a lot of names, and not very many positive ones. The second thing was that we listened, and this is a bit of time later. We actually listened to what Alison was going to do about it. What was her reaction? What was her next step forward? Because it wasn't really up to us to say, Alison, you've got to do this. It was a case of, hey, what does she really want to do? And she was real definite about what she wanted to do. She wanted another world title. She wanted to go to Delhi, to the Commonwealth Games, and these were the only sort of big challenges that she had left. And so the third part to that was to actually support her, whatever the decision was that she made. And that was real easy. She went to the World Champs, which were in Melbourne, and did a personal best and did very, very well. So she was really focused on that. The other thing that she decided to do was to be part of the teams pursuit, and that's a bit like going out of the single skiff, go and be involved with a four all of a sudden. And but she managed to do that, and so we turned around and said, yep, we'll support her in that, and Kay and I had a marvellous trip to the London Olympics to watch her compete there. But for her, even though she got to the Olympics and she got a fifth placing in the teams pursuit, it'll be a real letdown for her. I'll never get over it. She has probably got over it pretty well, but I think it'll irk her to the day she dies, really. It was just out of her control. That was the frustrating part.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so changing gears just a little bit. Would you be able to tell me about Ellie's achievements outside of sort of her sporting career? Perhaps how did she fare academically, and has she always, or is she an all-rounder, an all-round achiever?
She probably has always been quite focused, and academically she got her degrees at uni, but I remember her saying that she could have done better, but it was the time constraint, and she was one of these people that she probably learnt a lot of time management, because she knew she had practice and set out all the things, plus she also had these assignments and lectures, so she had definite blocks of time and it just had to be completed in that, and she's got very good at that. Probably started more so at high school, wasn't it? There was a few blowouts when there was 3-4 o'clock assignments being done, but only a couple of times, and I think, in that respect, it was time management. She learnt that because that was all the time that was available and it just had to be done. And she got her degrees, but she said, well, if I focused only on my academic stuff, she could have got a lot better, but we have always saying, C's get degrees and no one worries about it once you've got graduated. So I think time management was something that she perhaps learned. Probably Susie's much the same. To fit all these things in, that you've just got to do that. And there was things that perhaps she may have missed out on, like school socials and things, but I don't think it's hindered her socially anyway, in that respect.
Well, she socialised a lot with her sporting peers to make up for it anyway.
But as time goes on and they get more narrow in their focus, they don't, I don't think that it wasn't a problem for her to sacrifice those. She didn't see them as sacrifices, you know, there'll be time later, because I think also your sporting career is not a lifetime of participation at that level, so there'll always be time to catch up. So, yeah.
Okay, so Karen and Stu. So he's always been a high achiever in sport. And so what age did you realise, oh, he's going to be pretty good at rugby? Very good.
I don't think he was always good at sport. He played for Green Island as, you know, from 7, and there was a lot of other boys in his team that were absolutely outstanding. I thought that they were going to be All Blacks, and I even told the coaches I thought they were going to be All Blacks. And as they got on, they stayed the same size, and the men got a bit bigger, and he stuck with it. Some of the other boys, they were very good at golf or tennis or rugby, at all 3 disciplines, and they actually went on to the other disciplines. So he wasn't always outstanding, but when he got to about 13, I could sort of see that he was pretty good. I remember one of the teams he played up in Zingaree. He played Zingaree, and he was first 5, and I think he scored 3 tries, and I think he kicked all the conversions and a couple of penalties and won the game for them. And at that time I thought, oh, it actually shocked me a bit, you know. So he was pretty good at tennis. He won the Green Island Cup for the year at tennis. He's not a bad golfer. But rugby's his game.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it definitely is. Okay, so as a parent, what factors do you think contributed the most to Ben's success? A lot of it was the coaches. He had some pretty good coaches in the time that he was playing rugby, and we lived in a street that was very close to the rugby field. So every night, all the street would go out after tea, and they'd all go down to the rugby field, and they'd be kicking around balls and playing touch, and that happened every night, and it was a fun thing. But they developed a lot of skills in doing that, and a lot of friendships too. Yeah, definitely. Oh, so it's all about sort of that play and making sure that they have fun along the way as well. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So
Cool, so perhaps we'll open, I'll ask a couple more questions and we'll open it up to the whole group, so if you'll feel free to chip in. I'm interested to know what the sort of most important thing was that you did in bringing up your child to be, you know, world champions and world beaters. If you had to say one thing, perhaps what would it be? Tough question.
Just being there and supporting them, whether they win or lose. I mean, it's nice when they win, but you have to be there when they lose as well. It's just important to be there for them. Hear their moans, their groans, or share the life and their successes.
Yeah. And as parents, would you ever critique their performance as athletes? Or
I think one of the things that has perhaps kept Susanna grounded is that her brothers kind of kept her down. I mean, they didn't ever praise her as much as they could have or should have. Yeah. And her father's pretty good at bringing her down to earth. I think it's a saying though. I think how you deal with the losses and the downs is what makes you. And I mean, one of Bates's comments used to be to her, it's only a game. Get real, it's only a game, you know. She would be pretty upset. We had a thing on our fridge for a long time. Susanna says, second seriously sucks. And that's sort of her motto. She hates losing and she's very determined. So you have to be there for them in those losses as well as be there for the good times.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I can't fatigue of cricket because they haven't played an hour of cricket in my life, so I just stay away from it. Basketball I can do a little bit, but I think the key thing earlier on, probably it was easy to make negative comments and say, well, that wasn't a very good game, or you didn't do that, or whatever, things that were obvious. I think I learned as time went along that it was far better to find something positive and say, well, that wasn't a very good game, but A, B, C and D, you know, you scored so many points. And I think over the years, that's been the key thing, to try and keep positive no matter what. Everybody wants the child to win. You get upset when they don't because you know they're upset, but you've got to try and contain it and put it in perspective, and then come out with something positive and look forward to the next game. Otherwise, they will get sick of it probably, and so will you. But it's that key thing to keep them moving, keep them positive in my view, over the years, and be there, because there are lots of downs. There's always another mountain to climb. They achieve something, get into a team, play well, but then there's another team to get into, or there's another game, and then that doesn't go quite so well. And the higher up you get, the more those downs occur, because it's far more competitive. So you know, there are good games and bad games, and you've got to try and treat them the same and deal with them yourself, as well as keep the child buoyed up.
I think we also said that our children were to play team games from a young age, just because of the skills that they learned, and supporting them, because a lot of the teams, they were perhaps some of the better players in the team, and yet they still had to work with the team if they lost or things like that. We sort of pushed that it was, well, you're part of this team, you know, it's not just you. And so these were all skills that had built up from quite a young age. And we just felt that single sports, you know, sort of were better left till later on when they were a bit older, and they learnt a few more skills of working in a team.
In fact, we had a rule with all four of the children that they weren't allowed to play what I call selfish sports, unless they were playing team sports as well. And our son was playing golf and tennis, but he also was playing basketball and rugby as well. And the social skills that they learned, you know, through playing in a team sport, I mean, they're life skills, and we were real sticklers on that one with all four of the kids. And the other thing we have, I have a wee 3-stage saying that I said to the kids when they were old enough to appreciate it, and I said, well, there's 3 things with sport, and it's in this order. You play sport, number 1, you play sport to have fun, to enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying it and you're not having fun, find another sport. And that was absolute number 1. Number 2 was you have to respect the officials. You have to respect the laws of the game. You have to respect the opposition and all of the coaches, the officials, etc. And number 3 was, and in this order, mind you, number 3 was you have to do better than second. So. And it's not that I'm competitive at all.
I think part of helping your child through their sporting days is making sure whatever sport they play, you turn up early. You don't turn up just as they're about to run on the field. You make sure they turn up with all their gear. They haven't got one boot left at home. Before they leave, even the night before, pack everything so they're not rushing out the door, and neither are you. Because if they arrive there frazzled, you're frazzled, their game's probably going to go out the door, whatever they play. So that's probably there. And I think no matter what happens throughout their life, they grow up. They get married, they have partners, they have girlfriends, they always come back to mum and dad. Whenever you're there for the good and the bad, but at the end of the day, it always comes back to you. So always be there for them, no matter what age, they'll always come back. Once you show them out, they come back.
Trust
They
me,
keep coming back.
they come back.
It's being there the whole time to support them, but right from an early age, trying to teach them that get your stuff ready so we're not running out the door, because everybody's lives seem to be busy now. You're always running to work, you're running everywhere. So help them to prepare right from an early age, that they get their stuff ready, you're ready, you're not getting in the car and they're scrambling back into something. We've all done it, but it does help.
Cool, thank you. That's some great pointers there. In terms of, I've got 2 questions, and then we might open it up. What do you think? Do you think you guys, as parents, did something differently for these children to succeed compared to your other children, or what's that factor that made them get to the top and make them succeed as well as they're doing now?
In my view, I think in each of these 3, I think, they're all fiercely determined and they're very focused, and that's probably driven, they've driven themselves, we've just been there to support them. I think that's the key, really. And
they're not scared to train either. They don't hate going to training. I think they sort of love going to training. You hear a lot of the boys moaning about training or whatever, but if they actually like going to training, it makes a big difference.
So you as parents didn't have to sort of push them out the door and tell them to... No. Okay. Yeah.
You have to say, hey, you've had enough practice, you've been out there shooting baskets or shooting netball and that there for the last 3 hours. Hey, the spotlight's going to run out shortly. Get inside and do some work, or get to bed. And that, I think I can say, same for Ben and Suzie, is that as Ali, the passion is definitely self-motivated. It's definitely there. There was no pushing from us at all.
I'm sure all 3 have got into a habit of training virtually every day. As far as I'm aware, though even with cricket, which you might think requires a level of fitness, not only is there a training program, but if that's not in place, Susanna will train virtually every day of the year. And I think you probably find that with everybody. They understand that basic fitness, which is required to allow them to then focus on the other things in the game or in the sport. They don't have to worry about their fitness. They've trained so hard, they've got it to a level that they can put that aside and get on with the other aspects. And that's probably the difference in terms of some of the other people I see. They're not disciplined enough, or they're not prepared to just train every day, because that's what it comes down to.
And that means not going to the party or not going to the function. And a lot of people used to say, "Oh, but you missed out on things," and she said, "Well, look what I get for the little sacrifice I've made."
It's the support of the whole family. I remember a Christmas dinner being put on hold till the training was done. But there was a few eyes rolled and things like that. Oh. But
I was getting hungry. She still wasn't back from her bike ride.
You shouldn't have joined if you can't laugh.
So to all of you, is there anything that you would have done differently, like when they were younger, or if you turn back time? Is there
Probably
anything
play
that
golf.
you changed?
Yeah, right. I would have said to Ali, pick a sport where you get a bit of money from. Think of your parents.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I could think of is when Ben was going to all the trials, under 32 or under 48 kg trials, and Alex or whatever, I'd come after the game and I'd say to him, "Well, you're definitely in, you scored 3 tries there, you're definitely in, you're definitely in." And then when it came to the picking of the team, he wasn't in, it was like...
And it was only in later years he told us to, how much it upset him that he said I was in. And he sulked all the way home in the car because he didn't make it. But I think it's really important that you are there to support them. They get knocked all the time. Nobody's perfect, no sport's perfect. They do get knockbacks.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard at times because you can see how knockback they are and they don't want to say too much, but you can just see it in their faces. So it's just being there.
It'd be probably fair to say that they, like anything in life, you learn more from your mistakes and your knockbacks than you do from your successes, and it's how you cope with those and the support that you're given during those knockbacks. And I mean, one particular meet that Kay and I went to, lucky enough to go to Holland and one of the world champs, and Alison missed out on the world champs by 0.04 of a second, and that's after 3.5 minutes of riding round. And when she came off that and eventually came out, she was absolutely devastated, but not for herself. She was devastated that we had gone all the way from New Zealand to there, and she only got second. We turned around and said, "Hold on a second, kid." You know, once again, it's only a game, it's only sport, and you know, she was thinking of us, and I mean, we were pretty chuffed that she got through the final, and she did a PB, and can't ask for much more than that.
Cool, fantastic. Thank you very much. Now we're going to open it up to the audience, to the crowd. So, has anyone wants to start us off? Perfect.
Funding opportunities. I've got a daughter who's a golfer, and I've been an individual sport, and it was actually very few. There's 2 girls who play golf in Dunedin. What sort of opportunities for individual sports did you seek out or try and find to facilitate sort of the travel and things involved in the experiences you need to provide for your children?
Yeah, well, I would say that Alison's been very, very fortunate being here in Dunedin with the support that she got, and I can name especially the Shanks Foundation. But it's a catch-22, and I mean you have to be at a certain level before you get the funding, and this is where I know at the international level, when the athletes get to a certain level, they get the thing PEGS grants and things like this, but they've got to be at a certain level on the world stage before they get those funding. But you know, how do they get there? You know, you need the funding and that beforehand. But being in Otago, especially, I mean, with the Shanks Foundation, it's a fantastic facility for the high achievers. The next level down, I mean, it's, you know, a lot of it's up to the parents.
Very much so,
obviously, you know, and and a lot of it is to do with the attitude of the athlete as well, and people will support somebody who's obviously trying to help themselves. I know that's been Ali's case, but yeah, you're right, Robin. She should have played golf.
I think what I've realised here now in Dunedin, we're pretty fortunate. A few years ago, I sort of felt we were always second fiddle to Canterbury, for example, because we played Canterbury week in and week out and we lost all the time. And you grew up here thinking that we were in the right place, or somehow there were other opportunities. But it just so happened that Canterbury was stronger at that time. In recent years, of course, if you take cricket, in particular women's and men's, and lots of other sports, we seem to have done a lot better. And that's because of the facilities we have here and the support we have here from places like the Community Trust. And so I think if you look hard enough, you'll find what you need here at least to get to that next level. And indeed, I think a lot of people are envious of what we've got here with the Edgar Centre and the stadium and the setup. So it's all here. It's just a matter of making sure you use it.
Yeah, I can confirm, what Robin just said there, because Alison, obviously being in the umbrella of the Bike NZ group, and when she's been talking with the other cyclists, with the exception of Southland, the other places within New Zealand, they don't support their local athletes like Otago does, and it's something that as a community we can be enormously proud of.
Did they answer your question?
Yeah.
That is hard. You have to try.
It is a very small minority sport. We've got lots of boys who play, but we've got, as I say, 2 girls. So, and to get options to represent your province or age group, we're going to have to look elsewhere to join other provinces potentially for other tournaments and stuff. So.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for putting yourself in the hot seat. My question is, if you're seeing your daughter's team increase their workload for training, and now you see them whittling themselves away and they're all getting injuries, what's your suggestion? Do you speak up, or do you just encourage them to keep going, or what's your suggestion there?
Your meaning as a parent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm saying go for it, keep going, don't stop, and fight through your injuries. But
Be careful
I'm
as
one
to
of
what
those,
kind
I'm one
they
of
are. I
those.
mean,
yeah,
we've been to the hospital so many times I thought, well, get me away. Sprained ankles and so on, and some of those things came about because there was too much work and players got tired and so on.
and that's what the team are now starting to have more and more injuries.
Yeah.
I think it's quite hard, perhaps not when our children were going through, because there was the definite seasons, winter and summer, but now it seems that, you know, if you show any promise in anything, well, there's the actual season and then there's off-season training, and so that they basically, and they're picking up children a lot younger with so-called talent that's perhaps driving them, and you're getting these injuries. And I sort of believe that if you're good enough, you can take time out to get over your injury and come back in.
Yeah, I think it would be short-sighted to actually, you know, not look after that injury, you know, and I mean, you're not going to be performing at your best is one thing, but also it probably doesn't actually create a good discipline. I mean, Alison has had a few injuries, and so has you know, a couple of the other children in the family, and they do have to take time out to actually recover, in my view, to look at the big picture and say, okay, well, you could go through this injury now, but if you don't get a chance to actually come right again, there's a chance that it could end up being, you know, a devastating decision later on.
So would you talk to the coach or the manager or something, because the whole team is now starting to get more and more injuries?
Yeah, well, I would definitely talk on behalf of my child anyway, and I'd turn around and say, hey, look, you know, my responsibility, and I presume, you know, the child's younger.
She's 14, and,
Yeah.
and her sport is a all-year sport, and she's cut back half to training, but now we're seeing that the other, you know, all the rest of the team are all falling back for injuries because they've increased the training. And I'm like,
Yeah, I think there's a real danger when you're younger. I see it a lot in young tennis players, because you're using, you know, all year round doing the same thing, and they're going to be stress injuries and so on, and a bit of classical net, a lot of stress fractures because we've done too much. Cricket is the same, too much bowling. So I think you've got to be careful, and especially at a young age, because it doesn't take long for those injuries not to repair each time, and then you carry them forward. And I know Susanna's got injuries which she probably could do without, but it happened when she was younger. It's a balance.
It is, yeah, because people are pushing weights and things like that now, and you just, I mean, you've got to give them time to grow, really, and it's just, I did question with Alison, wasn't it, when the weight thing, but because they're pushing these children that have never done weights before, and to, you know,
it might be worth questioning whether the training's appropriate to what we're doing. I mean, you've always got to have the right training too, and the balance of training. So it might be worth inquiring of the coach whether the training is correct for what you're doing.
I know they've increased the training more, and as they've increased it, we've noticed the team falling away with more and more injuries. The coach hasn't noticed it.
I think at 14 years old too, it's probably parents. For me, I would probably be making that decision yet. I would be, because they nix. If it's an injury, when you're young, your bones and everything heal so much faster when you get older. And if you don't get on top of that now, it's probably going to nibble for a long time.
Yeah, well, she's pulled back probably 50% of her training.
And she's probably better off to do that now than to get older, and then it nibbles again, and then it becomes a huge problem. When they get older, they're hopefully managed by the team doctors or whoever's, somebody's overseeing that. But when that's young, it's probably...
You might push her away from the sport too.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking could be the next step, so thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, just behind you.
Roy alluded to this before with regards to politics, and I'm discovering that there's lots of politics and personalities in sport. Can you share with us, look, as an adult, I can deal with it because, obviously I'm mature like everyone in this room, but it's not really fair on, we're talking 10-year-olds, Can you talk us through different stages as well, because it's different for a 10-year-old to a 14-year-old and then to a 16-year-old dealing with these politics? Any thoughts that you can share in advice?
Well, I'll go back to the example that I skipped over, and that was that, and the politics was within the sport itself. And Alison was, at the time, was playing in the New Zealand A team and the New Zealand netball team, but she's also training within the Silver Fern squad. And she was not picked in the Otago team, and they said, you can go and play in the Otago B team. And in her shooting stats were there, she was the fittest by a country mile, all these sorts of things, and that really irked her. And it wasn't as bad as taking her event away from the Olympics, but to her it was turning around thinking, hold on a second, I'm better than the Blimmin' B team. And so, that's when she left netball and went cycling. So they probably did her a favour. But
I think that's probably a bit of the determination and arrogance, perhaps, that they do have to get to the top.
Yeah, and she was, she was really focused on going all the way, and that was going to be a huge roadblock. The politics when they're younger, I think, and I'm having been a coach myself with rugby for 7 years, that's one thing I very, very much tried to do, was to absolutely be crystal clear with the kids and also with the parents. It's one of the things when they're younger, they probably don't appreciate or need to know about the reason for some of the decisions that are being made. And I would be saying to my 10-year-old, even my 14-year-old, hey, look, are you enjoying it? Are you enjoying the sport you're doing? And there are so many different opportunities out there, and if they aren't enjoying that environment and politics is getting in the road, my humble opinion is, hey, get them to do something else that they do enjoy. Sometimes, unfortunately, there are personality clashes and these sorts of things. But that number one for me is you've got to have fun. You've got to enjoy it.
I don't think there's any team without politics in it. And I guess my rule is try not to get involved in it, because your child probably doesn't appreciate you getting in there and stirring it up. Because it may rebound or come back and bite you in some ways anyway. So you just have to bite your lip, unless it gets totally out of hand. And you realise there are issues in the team which are just pulling it apart. But provided you think the coach is reasonably competent and is doing an okay job, I think generally you've just got to let it go and hope that it will work itself out. And if your child is playing well enough, they will get on the court. And stay away from it, because it just becomes diabolical if you start to get involved in it too much. And it's not only when you're 10, I mean, it's all the way up. There isn't probably a team anywhere that doesn't have sort of political issues, including right at the top, from week to week as to who gets picked. And I think if you're going to play in those teams, you just have to learn that that's going to happen. And you just have to put up with it and bite your lip and take it on the nose sometimes. If you're not picked or you don't get on the court when you think you should have, and so on. It's the last thing you want to do is come screaming in there and saying, I was with my daughter or something not playing. Because there's probably might be a good excuse.
Yeah.
Good reason.
Yes.
Just got a couple of questions. Do any of you, or have any of you coached your own child in any of the sports that they've done? And question number two, have you ever come or been in a situation where you can see your child and possibly making the wrong decisions that you've maybe thought now they should be doing something different, that you've tried to persuade them to do that? For example, I've got a child who plays football, is quite handy, but when he plays, sometimes he'll play, he'll hold the ball, and other times he'll like what a passing game when he hogs the ball is dreadful. And as a coach, how do you deal with a strong person that won't necessarily do what they do?
Get somebody else to coach. They will tell you. You won't have to worry about it.
So did everyone hear that question?
Yeah.
At the back there? Yep. Great.
I coached the kids at tennis when they were younger and at basketball, mini ball when they were smaller, but not to a level that really mattered. So it wasn't really important. It was more just getting the basics and letting them have fun and so on. So I can't really comment. And I think as they got older and got into the better teams, I wouldn't go near them. I hope that somebody with the appropriate skills, and they did. I mean, that was the key thing. As somebody said before, the coaches all the way through and into Eden and at schools and so on were such that you could see they knew what they were doing. They gave, in particular, Susanna and all the kids really, their time and effort, and it was something you didn't need to get involved in. So, but by default, on occasion, you probably have to, but it's not that easy if it's your own child. Because, of course, the other parents are watching too, aren't they? So, has he been trained that way? Was he being told that he did? And before you know it, there's groundswell. So maybe an assistant coach.
I mean, not as much as Kay, because Kay coached for 20 odd years with netball with all the kids, but I was coaching with both basketball and rugby. It would be fair to say I'm one of those parents who turn around and give their own kids a real rough deal. In other words, my kids, you know, the girls when they're playing basketball, and Derek when he was playing rugby, he would have been much better off if he'd had another coach. In other words, you know, if there was somebody's turn to stand down and there was a bit of a toss-up, my boy was on the sideline. But it did come to the stage where the other team was short and they'd turn around and say, right, anybody in our team want to play for the opposition? Derek put his hand up straight away because he could get it going. But I understand what you're saying, it's not easy. But I think it does boil down to the personality of the child and of yourself if you're the coach.
I haven't done a lot of coaching, but I've done a bit of coaching on the sideline. One of the worst things I've ever done was we used to have a wee thing with Ben and I, and he was halfback, and I'd yell out to him sometimes, you know, blindside, you know, BS, blindside Ben Smith. And one day he picked up the ball and I yelled out, BS, and he runs around the side of the scrum and get absolutely hammered by one of the forwards. And that was the last time I did any coaching.
Now we have one over here, was it?
Yeah.
You've sort of, first of all, we've always encouraged that whole do everything sort of thing. But the opportunities, there's so many things, Kay, you alluded to that too, like there's so much more happening and it's spreading across seasons so much. So if you, and some children and some young people are really good at making those decisions for themselves about what pathway they want to take. If they can't make those decisions and you feel that they're getting pulled and pushed and encouraged and they actually want to do everything because they don't know where they want to go yet, what would you do about that?
Well, can I just pick up on that because I'm pretty passionate about this, especially through to the high school years. If they're enjoying it, let them do it. I have a wee bit of a problem with some of these sports that perhaps go sort of cherry picking and saying, hey, this kid here, will take him at the age of 12, 13, 14, and they're going to be the world champ or whatever. And the risk is that you're going to burn that desire out of the kid, you know, and you can see whether whether the athlete is actually enjoying themselves. And there's been a recent study done with the top elite athletes in New Zealand, and they took a number of swimmers, rowers, cyclists, and netballers, and a couple of other sports. And they tabled the number of sports that these athletes played and participated in high school. And with the exception of one swimmer, I think they only did, I think, 2 or 3 sports at the high school, but all the others, they did plenty of sports because they just loved it, they enjoyed it. I mean, John Walker didn't start running competitively as an athlete until he was 16. I mean, Alison didn't start cycling until she was 22. Wee bit different, but yeah, to actually turn around and grab somebody, and unless of course they're Lydia Ko or Tiger Woods, yeah.
I feel like with men also it needs to that but if they themselves, you know as a parent that they're overloading themselves, like they can't, like, and you should never make that decision for them, but if you're going to stretch
Well, you have to, don't you? And then you have to sort of make them feel that they made it themselves. Because they do get to a stage where they're stretched, and that happened to Susanna on numerous occasions, and had to say, well, you're going to have to make a choice about this. But I agree with Roy that if they're passionate about more than one sport, and they can organise themselves to play in the different seasons, it can help a little bit. And certainly for Susanna, playing basketball, she would come back really fresh to cricket, enjoy that cricket, but by the end of the season, long season, you've had enough, and I know everybody who plays sport probably feels that way by the time of the season, you're ready for a break. And you're asking some of these kids to carry on for 12 months and not get a break from it, and they will get stale and get burned out. That's my feeling. So when this has come up, my view has always been, have a break, play that other sport if you can, and then come back fresh.
I think
totally agree, and I hope this takes sport organisation.
I think picking up on that, all our kids played tennis quite young, and it was quite specialised. They did a lot of coaching every day. I used to drive them around the place for all this training. They played lots of tournaments. None of them play tennis now. It was too much too soon.
It is hard nowadays, because, I think because I saw there was an intermediate sort of competition up in Tauranga recently, more competitors than the Commonwealth Games. Everything's starting younger and there's more pressure, and your kids probably think, oh, if I don't make myself available for this team, well, that's it, although won't. But if they're good enough, if they're passionate and committed to it, they can have the winter's training off and then come back. And I think that refresh is such a big thing.
I think Kay's quite right there. If they are good at it and they do take a year off, Ben finished high school and took a year off, went to the UK as a gap student, so he was out of the scene for a year. If they've got a natural talent, they'll come back and pick it up. So, you just want to, it didn't do them any harm. A lot of kids stayed and they went into the rugby program here straight from high school, and they didn't go anywhere. So, and it's really hard. He got knocked. He never made those age group teams. He never made, under 18 he played for North Otago. Dunedin didn't want him. He played for North Otago. They rang up and said, we'll have him. They don't want him down there. So it doesn't matter. You've just got to remember and remind them that you might not have made the grade this time, but they might burn out when they're young because they've done so much, or they just didn't know what they wanted to focus on. Yeah, so I don't know.
And I think every coach sees different things in different players, and you've got to respect that, sort of, or someone was saying, the politics and that. It's, when they're little, yes, each coaches usually change from season to season, and so, one coach might think they're wonderful, and the next one think, well, no, I don't want them in my team. So, that's the prerogative. The coaches put themselves out there to give their time, so, yeah. That's where the parent support comes in as well.
And also, if they've got more than one string to their bow and they turn around and don't do all that well in netball, don't make the silver fans, then they can go cycling.
Okay, time to move on then. Any more questions? Yeah, one from the back.
So you've all spoken about the backyard and the local rugby ground, and how important to your kids' development was informal play rather than the structured play?
I'd say very important. Yeah.
Absolutely huge.
Yeah.
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 It's. I seem to be hovering the floor here, but I believe that that's where the foundation of the enjoyment factor is created. And it's where, especially if they've got a group, you know, like the street that plays rugby or other siblings and that, and it's the competitive nature that comes out in them, but also, you know, enjoying those successes, but also the knocks and that type of thing. They feel it when they're doing the backyard cricket or the 3-on-3 basketball or 1-on-1 or whatever it may be. And yeah, I believe that is absolutely huge and paramount. And it sort of sets the bar for the enjoyment factor. And sometimes they get into structured sport and they turn around and say, hold on, this isn't all that fun. You know, and this is where an astute coach, especially when they're younger, will in fact make sure that fun factor is a priority. I believe it's paramount.
And they pick up a lot of skills when they're young like that too, and then they realise that actually they're not bad.
I can mention cricket games.
But yeah, with cricket it's particularly important because, and that's what happened with Susanna, as Joe mentioned, two boys playing cricket in the backyard. Susanna, you don't throw like that, you bowl like this, you bat like that, you're out. If you're out, you come back and you're competing on that same level. And I notice in a lot of the teams, and the provincial teams, some of the girls who play cricket have had two older brothers, and they've learnt those skills from them because 10 or 15 years ago they didn't have necessarily those cricketing skills. And it was out in the backyard or on the muddy out at McAndrew Bay for hours and hours at a time. So I think if there is a family group or a group of neighbours who play and everybody gets involved, that's really important.
It's one way of keeping them grounded because there's usually people, until they get right to the top, there's usually people better than them, so it sort of keeps them down.
I was just going to ask you, all three of you appear to have very humble children. Do you think, what contribution do you think you've made to keeping them so well grounded? Or don't you think they are?
Probably just keep reminding them that, where they come from, and, they're no better than anybody else, so, yep, just keep them grounded.
You need to remind them how lucky they are at times to be doing what they're doing, and not having to, necessarily get a job they don't like, which may come sooner or later. But it's hard to say, but there's never a time you sort of have to tell Susanna to pull her head in. She is quite realistic about what's happening, and as I say, there's always another mountain to climb. You think that when you get to that point, they might say, "Oh, I've got here, and I'm now fine." But it's not. It's we need to win that series or that game or the next level, and so generally they don't get sort of cocky because they know that there are, while they're up at this level, there are still levels and levels of success above that. So that keeps them going. Sorry?
Reminding them not to be too complacent.
Yeah.
I mean, in our case, Alison is just one of 4, and she gets no special treatment as far as we're concerned. I mean, I don't know if Nikki agrees or not, but that's the way it is. And but she wouldn't want it any other way either. And her friends, she's made through school, that type of thing. You know, they keep her on her toes and keep her feet on the ground, which is unbelievably healthy in my view.
Okay. Oh, I was going to shut it down. One really eager over here. Yep.
I kind of direct it, but you know, because towards Stu and Karen, because they kind of mentioned Ben didn't always make his rep teams and things. So growing up for a child who thinks they could possibly be in a rep team, it can be quite devastating when they don't make a rep team. And I was just kind of curious, making it open up across the board, sort of how you supported them and the strategies you might have used to keep them going and want them to carry on in their sports and things.
Susanna had a really telling moment when she was trialling for basketball teams and girls that perhaps didn't have quite the level of skills that she had were getting in and she wasn't. And someone was given the task of telling her, basically she was too fat to make a New Zealand team. Wasn't said quite like that, but that's what he meant. And that was quite difficult. In fact, I rang him and said, you have to be careful talking to young girls in that way. It could have made or broken somebody. She was very upset, absolutely devastated. She cried, she swore. What she said about New Zealand basketball wasn't worth repeating. But she just, I mean, that was nothing to do with us. Well, I guess we were there supporting, but she was fiercely determined and she was going to prove them wrong, which she did. So, yeah, the knockbacks are what makes them, I think.
Yeah, I think with Ben, it was he got knocked back quite a few times in the weight grade trials and that, and I actually think it made him train harder and work harder and work on everything to make sure he was in. They couldn't say no to him next time. Yeah. I don't think we really needed to do a lot. We just had to be there.
I mean, Alison spent a lot of time on the bench, not out there on the court in a number of teams, and I mean, that's once again the coach's prerogative. And she was saying, hold on, I've got the best shooting stats, why am I not on the court? And you're saying, well, hold on, that's the coach's prerogative. And you know, and Robin alluded to it before, I mean, sometimes you just don't go anywhere near the coach, you just make it worse. And in the end, she had to make the decision to leave that particular sport. Pretty drastic, and I don't suggest that, you know, each athlete or whatever does that, especially later on, but in the earlier years, I mean, they could leave it and then come back to it, of course. You've got that time on your side.
What you have to remind him of is that a lot of his competition will drop out as the time goes on. And if he or she has the determination to keep working hard, that she will eventually rise to the surface, or he will come to the surface, because the other kids won't have that determination or that work ethic. And Ben's probably a really good example of that. And as Joe said, Susanna got a knockback, started losing weight, really put an effort into that, got fitter, and that was the key. So it was at the time it was a difficult time, but when you look back on it, it was actually a turning point that made the difference. So sometimes those hard points are actually key points along the way. They turn things around. It may not seem it at the time, and it's really difficult as parents when your children are getting knocked back and they're disappointed, but you've somehow got to keep them motivated, keep them going, and keep them enjoying it, and hopefully come through.
That's probably what makes them the amazing adult athletes are. They've got a whole package. They've got the mental skills, they've got the training skills, they've got the skills for everything. They've been knocked back, they've picked themselves up, and they've kept it together. And they're really amazing people.
And probably looking at the career as a whole, that's the most important matter. They've all had knockbacks, they've all missed teams, they've all injuries probably that have put them out for a while, and yet they've got up again and kept going, and then said, I want to get to that level and I'm going to keep going until I do, and then they get to that level, they go to the next level. And they just keep working and working and working. And it's a matter of discipline and organisation, but that comes from them in the first instance, that drive to set a goal and achieve it. And we just get dragged along on the way. Really, that's what it comes down to, and support them encourage them when they're down and drive them here and there. And
Be a good taxi driver.
yeah.
Lucky lass.
I just want to know that your kids are so determined to reach their goals. Were they able to switch off with their training or from their chosen sport at any time, or were they told they need to learn how to switch off?
Yeah, good question. Alison was, as Kay alluded to before, was very busy, and she had a whole lot of other things, and especially while she was going through her netball career, she was also doing a double degree here at Otago University, so she had to switch all the time. Later on, when she was in her cycling side of things, she was doing her own marketing and having to look after a lot of the things to do with her own sponsorship, and she was able to, put that into a business type perspective, and so it was something that she learnt because she was so busy when she was younger, and and she has that really good skill of being able to go chunk and close that door, and then to the extent that she ended up doing what you shouldn't do. She ended up marrying her coach, but both of them are very, very good at being able to switch off at the same time. Okay, we're in work mode, boom, now we're in partner type mode. But it'll depend on their I believe their previous thoughts and what they practice. But if they're busy and they go from one thing to another, it becomes a thing by default.
I know with Ben, he not so much switching off to another job or whatever, but he likes to come home on the weekends, and you might say, oh, that was a good game or something, and he'd say, oh, how's my dog, and he'd start on a different subject. He doesn't really like talking about rugby 24/7. He likes to talk about other things, and the trouble with a lot of people who don't really know him, he'll come up and, you're great, it was a great game at fullback or da-da-da-da, and he probably would be more interested to hear what they do or, other than rugby, because, he works it all the time and he likes to talk about other things. But so he does switch off quite good.
Something else that he does is like he plays social touch. Now he goes out and he does the stuff with his mates or he used to.
Yeah.
Well, that was part of when the kids were playing in the street. They had a touch team, which they took right through till they were about 20. They played all these kids from as soon as they were old enough played in this touch team. Yeah, they do switch off. Have fun. It's really important. And when they come home, they have some fun.
Yeah. I think there is a danger if they're playing at a top level and they are involved in it every day, 24 hours a day almost, which can happen. The performance will drop off. And that happened to Susanna last year when she was not only playing but also working as a development officer, and it probably happened to the 3 or 4 other people who were in that position. Yes, they were being paid a reasonable amount, but it meant there was no time away from cricket, and it got to the point where it just basically we had to draw a line and say it's not going to work if you do that, because you just do not have the downtime all the time where you can go away and relax and get away from cricket, because weekends we're coaching, we're arranging kids cricket and so on, and there was training during the week, and then games would come around, and there is a danger at the sort of level. It's probably not so much a danger with the rugby players or some of the men, because they don't have to do these other things, but you've got to be really careful that you're not getting over-committed, because at the end of the day what matters is your performance and the runs you score in cricket in particular, and you need to be able to maintain that, and that's changed. The whole system has changed because that didn't work very well last year, and so there's now a lot less money, but you're only required to train that's more focused on the playing aspect.
Yeah, I mean, Alison's very best time, she did sub 3:30, and there's only about 3 other athletes that have done that, including Sarah Ulmer, and she did that time after Craig and her had decided that she was going to have an extended break before the World Champs, and a lot of the other coaching and so-called experts turned around and they said, "Oh, you're a mug, you should be leading up to this and whatever." And they tried something different, and it worked. It really did. And she had this break, came into it totally refreshed, and nailed it.
The other danger is you do get burnt out, and for Susanna in particular, if she's doing too much, she gets injured, and she has injuries. So she has to take the time out. So her body's telling her, "Hey, you're doing too much." So it is important to have those switch off times.
Can I just say, my son played rugby at Green Island, and
well done.
I think it's fantastic that people like him come back to grassroots level and come along to the club for a pro sitting or something like that. It's so inspiring for young kids. And
Yeah, they just
really
grounded.
good,
Yep.
good place off here. Some of the Black Six have come down coaching things, but they get down to grassroots, and I
Yep.
think that's really inspiring for kids coming through. Just to mingle with these people that they consider real people.
Yep.
They're not just on TV.
Yep.
But these three kids are all quite good at doing that, aren't they?
Yeah, we encourage them, like, quite often we'll, might be somebody around in a room or something, I'll go, "Tubby Dyak over there, Ben, you might go and say g'day?" And he, "Oh yeah, yep," and he'll go over and just respect, and he's quite good at that.
Lots of support from them.
Yeah.
I think it's a good Otago thing too, because I think growing up here and getting the support, you have to remind them now and then that their obligation is to give something back to Otago sport, and you probably don't have to remind them that much, but every now and then when they're under a bit of stress and so on, and they've got to go and do these things, I certainly make the point that it's really important to go and do that. And they'll come back and say, Susanna will come back and say, "I really enjoyed that. I went to Tapanui today. I talked to these kids, or I had a prize giving at so and so." And the kids respond well. I think it's just seeing that they're actually real, and basically saying to the kids, "Well, look, if you put your mind to it, it wasn't so long since I was sitting there and listening to somebody." So we're more than happy to do that.
Alison, she mentions a talk that she had at high school from Bernice Manning, and she said, "Man alive, that had real impact on her." And then later on, she was coached by Anna Rodery in netball for a period of time, and once again, it was sort of an aha moment for her, and so as Robin said, they don't have any problem going back and talking to the kids, sort of knowing that that they do have a little bit of influence on especially the younger kids of what they're saying and being with them.
Susanna's aha moment was Sarah Ola. She set goals that Susanna's followed that goal setting plan Sarah set for her at a breakfast for champions or whatever it was.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So I think she appreciates what she got from that, so was willing to give it back.
Hey, I'm going to stop it now. There probably will be a couple of minutes after, if you have got that desire, that little question you haven't had a chance to answer to come up. I'm sure they don't mind staying an extra 5-10 minutes to answer that. But I would just like to say thank you very much to everyone for coming along and giving quite personal information. Obviously there is not a manual of how to do it correctly, but I think the biggest thing that shone through is just giving that support and being there for, would that be correct, being there no matter what, good times, bad times, just being there and listening to your children.